Emmanuel, 32, sits at his parents' dining table, stomach tight with anxiety. 10 years of financial sacrifice for his family, over $200,000 given, and yet his father Frank glares at him from across the table. "You're the most selfish son I've ever known," Dad shouts, face reddening as my brother Jason nods in agreement. Something inside me finally breaks. I reach for my briefcase, pull out a thick folder of papers, and place it on the table. "Here's everything I've paid for over the last 10 years. Before continuing, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you want to hear how I finally stood up for myself. After years of financial abuse, I grew up in Portland, Oregon, the firstborn son, in what appeared to be a typical middle-class family. My father, Frank, built a construction business from scratch through sheer force of will and an unyielding personality. At 58, he still carried himself with the commanding presence that intimidated clients and family members alike. My mother, Linda, worked as an elementary school teacher. Her gentle nature, a stark contrast to my father's domineering one. She avoided conflict at all costs, which meant she rarely defended me when Dad's expectations became unreasonable. My younger brother Jason, now 28, grew up in a different world than I did. While I faced intense pressure to succeed, Jason charmed his way through life with his easy smile and quick wit. Our parents never pushed him the way they pushed me. I was the responsible one, the one who would make something of himself, the one who would make the family proud. Jason was just expected to be Jason. From early on, the pattern was clear. I studied while Jason played. I worked while Jason partied. I saved while Jason spent. And, somehow, despite these differences, I was always the one who wasn't doing enough in my father's eyes. The first major conflict came when I decided to pursue a business degree instead of applying to law school as my father demanded. We argued for weeks, his voice echoing through our home as he listed all the ways I was throwing away my future. "Lawyers build legacies. Emmanuel," he'd shout. "Businessmen are a dime a dozen." But for once, I stood firm. I had a vision for my future that didn't align with his, and I wasn't going to compromise. Eventually, he stopped speaking to me for 3 months, only breaking his silence when tuition was due. Despite his disappointment, I thrived in my business program, graduating with honors and landing a job at a promising tech startup. My career took off faster than anyone expected. By 29, I had climbed to VP of operations, my salary more than tripling in just 7 years. Meanwhile, my father's construction business faced increasing competition, and my brother struggled to find direction after half-heartedly completing a communications degree. The first request for financial help came during my second year post-graduation. My father's business had hit a rough patch, and Jason's college tuition was coming due. "It's just temporary, Emmanuel," my mother assured me over the phone, her voice tight with worry. "Your father would never ask if it wasn't necessary. You know how proud he is." I agreed without hesitation, transferring $5,000 the same day. It felt good to help, to be the strong one for once. I saw it as a temporary support, a chance to give back to the family that had raised me. My best friend Marcus noticed the pattern before I did. We'd been friends since freshman year of college, and he knew my family dynamics better than anyone. "They're making your success their safety net," he commented one evening as we watched a basketball game at my apartment. "You've become their backup plan." I dismissed his concerns, defending my family's needs and my ability to help. But Marcus's words planted a seed of doubt that would grow over time. As my father's business continued to struggle and my own career flourished, I could feel his resentment building. He'd make offhand comments about corporate sellouts or question the ethics of the tech industry, all while accepting my financial support. My mother became more skilled at subtle emotional manipulation, sighing about unpaid bills or mentioning health concerns that mysteriously resolved after I wrote another check. Jason learned quickly that his charming smile and a sob story would unlock my wallet. Car repairs, rent shortfalls, a new laptop for a job that never materialized. The requests were endless and increasingly presumptuous. I still remember a Christmas dinner 3 years ago that illuminated the dynamics I was too blind to see. I had just received a substantial year-end bonus and mentioned possibly taking a vacation. A vacation? My father scoffed. Must be nice to have that luxury. Meanwhile, I'm working 60-hour weeks just to keep the lights on. My mother quickly added, "We're so proud of you, honey. It's such a blessing that you can enjoy these things while helping your family too." Jason smirked and said, "Hey, big bro, if you're looking to spend some of that bonus, my car could use an upgrade." I left that dinner with a heaviness in my chest and plans to help my father with his business expenses instead of taking the vacation I'd earned. The pattern was firmly established, though I couldn't yet see it clearly. My success was not my own. It belonged to my family. The internal conflict grew stronger with each passing year. I wanted to pursue my ambitions, to build the life I'd worked for, but the weight of family obligation held me back. Every promotion came with increased expectations from my family. Every raise meant more money diverted to their needs. Every achievement was shadowed by their subtle assumption that my success existed to solve their problems. What I didn't realize then was that I was being conditioned to serve as the family bank, not the family son. Looking back, I can trace a clear chronology of how my role as family provider evolved over those 10 years. What began as occasional help during emergencies gradually transformed into an expected lifeline that supported their entire lifestyle. The first major expense came just a year after I started working. My father needed back surgery that wasn't fully covered by insurance. The procedure and recovery would cost $28,000 out of pocket. When my parents mentioned they were considering a second mortgage on their home, I offered to pay for it instead. "You don't have to do this," my father said, his pride visibly wrestling with necessity. "I want to help," I insisted. "You've always taken care of me." The gratitude seemed genuine then. My father hugged me tightly before the surgery, tears in his eyes. "You're a good son, Emmanuel." Those words meant everything to me at the time. I felt like I'd finally earned his approval. The following year, my mother's car broke down beyond repair. Rather than see her struggle with unreliable transportation to her teaching job, I purchased her a new vehicle outright. $32,000, that would have been my down payment on a condo, became instead a Toyota Camry with her name on the title. "I can't believe you did this," she kept saying as I handed her the keys. "We'll pay you back somehow." That somehow never materialized, but I convinced myself it didn't matter. I was helping my family. Wasn't that what success was for? Year 3 brought a severe storm that damaged my parents' roof and caused water damage throughout their second floor. Insurance covered only a portion of the repairs, leaving them with a $45,000 gap. Again, I stepped in, working directly with contractors to ensure everything was restored properly. By year 4, Jason had graduated, but couldn't find employment that matched his expectations. His student loan payments came due, and suddenly, my monthly transfers included covering his $38,000 of education debt. "It's just until I land something solid," he promised, avoiding eye contact. "The job market is brutal right now." Jason's job search seemed to consist mainly of networking at bars and half-hearted online applications. Meanwhile, my father's business faced a crisis in year 5 when a major client filed bankruptcy, leaving several projects unpaid. The business needed a $50,000 cash injection to stay afloat, and once again, I was the one who provided it. "It's an investment in the family business," my father declared, as though he was doing me a favor by taking the money. "When things turn around, you'll see returns." I never saw a penny of those returns, but I did receive plenty of criticism about how the business should be run, despite my father refusing to implement any of my suggestions. Year 6 brought Jason's wedding to his college girlfriend, an event that somehow required a $35,000 budget. My parents insisted the ceremony needed to impress her wealthy family, and naturally, I was expected to cover the majority of costs. "We can't look like we can't provide for our son," my mother explained, as if family status was worth mortgaging my future. The expenses continued relentlessly. Year 7. My mother's medical emergency. Not fully covered by insurance. $18,000. Year 8. My parents' second mortgage payment to avoid foreclosure. $22,000. Year 9. Jason's car accident and resulting legal fees. $15,000. Beyond these major expenses were countless smaller ones that added up to approximately $30,000 over the decade. Birthday gifts that became expected necessities. Holidays where I was expected to fly everyone to my location. Utilities kept on when money was tight. Groceries during rough months. Cell phone bills when plans were unexpectedly expensive. The toll on my own financial health was substantial. While my peers purchased homes, maxed out retirement contributions, and enjoyed vacations, I lived in a modest apartment, contributed minimally to my 401k, and hadn't taken a proper vacation in years. It was Marcus who finally suggested I start documenting everything. "Just keep track, man. For your own sanity, if nothing else," he advised after listening to me vent about another unexpected family expense. What began as simple notes soon became detailed records of every transaction. Bank statements, receipts, canceled checks, all organized chronologically as evidence of a decade of financial sacrifice. Around the 7th year of this pattern, I met Rebecca through a work function. Smart, compassionate, and direct, she noticed my financial strain long before I admitted it to her. "You make 6 figures but live like you're barely getting by," she observed during our 3rd date. "Where does it all go?" Her background in financial counseling made her particularly attuned to the signs of financial stress. As our relationship deepened, so did her concern about how my family seemed to exploit my generosity. "There's a difference between supporting family and enabling dependency," she would say. "What you're describing sounds like the latter." I defended my family's needs at first, explaining their circumstances and my ability to help. But Rebecca asked questions no one had before. "Why isn't your brother working 2 jobs to pay his own debts? Why hasn't your father adjusted his business model after years of struggling? Why do emergencies only seem to happen when you've just received a bonus or raise?" My resentment grew as I began seeing patterns I'd previously ignored. Jason posting vacation photos on social media while claiming he couldn't make his car payment. My parents renovating their kitchen shortly after I paid off their emergency medical bills. The continuous cycle of crisis and rescue, with me always cast as the reluctant hero. Most frustrating was the realization that none of the loans were ever repaid despite countless promises. No interest in my financial goals or sacrifices. No recognition of the life I was postponing to support theirs. And certainly no gratitude beyond the momentary relief when checks cleared. I was becoming a resource rather than a son, an ATM with a familiar face. 2 months before the fateful dinner, the tension that had been building for years began reaching its breaking point. Jason announced his engagement to his girlfriend Megan, a pharmaceutical sales representative he'd been dating for just over a year. My parents immediately hosted an extravagant engagement party at an upscale restaurant downtown, complete with custom cocktails and a 5-course meal for 30 guests. No one consulted me about the event, but I received the bill 2 days later, forwarded from my mother with a sticky note that read, "Your share. Thank you, sweetie." The share amounted to $4,000. A week after the engagement party, Jason invited me to lunch. We met at his favorite steakhouse, where he ordered the most expensive items on the menu and an $80 bottle of wine before getting to the real purpose of our meeting. "Megan and I found the perfect house," he announced, sliding his phone across the table to show me photos of a sprawling craftsman in one of Portland's most expensive neighborhoods. 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, finished basement. "It's exactly what we've been looking for." "That's great," I replied, calculating the likely price tag in my head. "How are you planning to finance it?" Jason's smile faltered slightly. "Well, that's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. We need help with the down payment. Just $80,000 to get us started. We can handle the monthly payments." I nearly choked on my water. $80,000? Jason, that's not a small amount. "Have you looked into first-time homebuyer programs?" His expression darkened. "Those are for people who can't afford nice homes. Don't you want your brother to have stability? To start a family in a good neighborhood with good schools?" When I hesitated, the manipulation intensified. "I thought you'd be happy for me. I guess success has changed you. You've forgotten what family means." Before I could respond properly, I received a call from my father later that evening. His voice carried that familiar tone of authority that brooked no argument. "Jason told me you're being difficult about the house," he began without preamble. "I'm disappointed, Emmanuel. Family looks out for family. Your mother and I sacrificed everything to give you opportunities, and this is how you repay us? By denying your brother the same chances you had? Dad, $80,000 is a significant amount," I tried to explain. "I'm not saying no. I just need to think about it." "What's there to think about? You make more than enough. What else are you spending it on?" He paused, then added with subtle threat, "Family loyalty goes both ways, son. Remember who was there for you before you had all this money." The implication was clear. My relationship with my family was conditional on my financial support. After nearly an hour of pressure, I reluctantly agreed to help with Jason's down payment, even as something inside me reached its breaking point. That night, I called Rebecca and finally opened up about everything. The decade of financial support, the mounting resentment, the manipulation, and guilt trips. The feeling of being trapped in a role I never agreed to play. "They won't change if you don't change first," she said softly. "You're enabling this behavior by continuing to rescue them from consequences." Her words hit me with the force of revelation. I spent the next week researching financial abuse within families and was disturbed by how many patterns I recognized in my own situation. The guilt trips, the entitlement, the lack of boundaries, the assumption that my resources belong to everyone. I made a decision then to compile comprehensive documentation of all the support I'd provided. Late nights after work were spent organizing bank statements, receipts, and canceled checks spanning a decade. I created a detailed spreadsheet showing every expense, loan, and gift with dates and amounts. The final tally shocked even me. Over $300,000. As the family dinner approached, I decided to bring my documentation, though I wasn't sure I would use it. It felt like bringing a weapon to what should be a peaceful gathering. But something told me I might need protection. The morning of the dinner, anxiety churned in my stomach. Rebecca called to check in, her voice a soothing presence amid my turbulent thoughts. "Remember, you're not the villain for having boundaries," she reassured me. "Whatever happens, I'm here for you." I rehearsed potential responses to the guilt trips I anticipated, determined that this time would be different. This time, I would stand up for myself, if pushed too far. This time, I wouldn't cave to emotional manipulation. This time, I would advocate for my own financial well-being with the same vigor I'd advocated for theirs. Little did I know how severely my resolve would be tested that evening. Sunday evening arrived with perfect spring weather, the kind that normally would have lifted my spirits. I pulled into my parents' suburban driveway, noting that both my mother's Camry and my father's new truck were parked outside. I hadn't been told about the new truck, but I wasn't surprised. Financial transparency only seemed to work one way in our family. My mother greeted me at the door with her usual warm embrace. "Emmanuel, come in, come in. I made your favorite roast." The house smelled wonderful, I had to admit. My mother was an excellent cook, and her Sunday roasts were legendary in our family. As I stepped into the living room, I noticed new furniture, a leather sectional that must have cost several $1,000s, and a glass coffee table that definitely hadn't been there during my last visit. "You've redecorated," I observed casually. My mother waved dismissively. "Just a few little updates. Nothing special. Your father got a good deal through a client." My father emerged from his study, firm handshake ready. "Son, good to see you. How's that corporate job treating you?" "Very well, actually. We just launched a new product line that's exceeding projections." He grunted noncommittally. "Well, come sit down. We're waiting on your brother and Megan." We made awkward small talk about weather and local sports, while waiting for Jason and his fiancée. 20 minutes past the scheduled dinner time, they finally arrived, making a grand entrance. Megan thrust her left hand forward before even saying hello, the diamond on her finger catching the light. "Isn't it gorgeous?" she gushed. "Your brother has amazing taste." I nodded politely, knowing exactly how much that ring had cost because Jason had called me 3 months earlier, asking for a small loan of $12,000 for investment purposes. "Congratulations again," I said, managing a sincere smile despite my inner turmoil. They were happy, and I didn't want to diminish that, regardless of how it had been financed. My mother ushered everyone to the dining table, laden with her finest china and crystal glasses. The meal began pleasantly enough, with my mother serving her perfectly cooked roast beef, garlic mashed potatoes, and roasted vegetables. Conversation flowed around wedding plans and Megan's ideas for color schemes and venue options. It wasn't until the main course was well underway that my father cleared his throat and raised his glass. "I'd like to make an announcement," he declared. Jason and Megan found their dream home today. Everyone turned to the beaming couple as my father continued. 4 bedrooms in Laurelhurst. Perfect for starting a family. Let's toast to their hard work and determination in making this happen. I nearly choked on my wine. Hard work and determination? The down payment was coming from me, and I suspected the pre-approval they'd received was based on income expectations that included my regular contributions. "That's wonderful news," I managed to say. "If you don't mind my asking, how are you financing such a large purchase?" Laurelhurst is one of the most expensive neighborhoods in Portland. Jason shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "We've been saving, and the bank was very impressed with our application. It's a good investment opportunity. The property values in that area just keep rising." Before I could ask any follow-up questions, my mother jumped in. "Who's ready for dessert?" "I made your favorite chocolate cake, Emmanuel." The obvious deflection worked temporarily as she served generous slices of cake. The conversation shifted to my recent promotion, which should have been a positive topic, but my father couldn't resist a jab. "Corporate ladder climbing," he muttered between bites. All those hours making someone else rich. In my day, men built something of their own. The irony of his criticism, while benefiting from my corporate salary, wasn't lost on me, but I let it slide. I'd become adept at ignoring these small barbs over the years. Then came the catalyst that would change everything. My father mentioned that my cousin Alicia was struggling to pay for her final year of college. Her scholarships fell through, and your aunt and uncle are stretched thin with the twins' medical issues, he explained, fixing me with a meaningful look. They need about $25,000 to get her through. I told them you might be able to help. You told them that without asking me first? I questioned, unable to hide my surprise. Well, I assumed you'd want to help family, he replied, his tone hardening. It's not like you have a wife or kids to support. What else are you doing with all that money? I took a deep breath. Dad, I have other financial commitments right now. I'm not in a position to take on another major expense. What commitments? My father demanded. That fancy apartment? Dinners out with your girlfriend? Meanwhile, your cousin might have to drop out of school. I'm sorry about Alicia's situation, I said firmly. But I can't always be the solution to everyone's financial problems. My father's face reddened as he placed his fork down with deliberate control. So, that's how it is now? You've gotten too important for your family? Too successful to remember where you came from? Jason, sensing an opportunity, joined in. You've changed, bro. Remember when you used to come to all my games? Now we barely see you unless we need something. You're always too busy with work or Rebecca. My mother's eyes filled with tears. A reaction I'd seen countless times when she wanted to signal disapproval without direct confrontation. We've never asked for much, Emmanuel, she said softly. After all, we've sacrificed for you. The tension in the room thickened as my father's frustration mounted. You've forgotten what family means. You think that job, that money, makes you better than us? Everything you are is because of what we gave you. I remained silent, which only fueled his anger. Your brother would never turn his back on family like this, he continued. He understands loyalty. He understands sacrifice. Jason nodded solemnly, playing his part perfectly in this familiar drama. Finally, my father delivered the line that would change everything. You're the most selfish son I've ever known. You never sacrifice for this family. The room fell silent as I processed the stunning injustice of his accusation. Years of financial support, hundreds of thousands of dollars given, countless opportunities sacrificed, all forgotten, or worse, expected as my obligation rather than appreciated as my choice. In that moment, something fundamental shifted inside me. The fog of familial obligation lifted, and I saw with perfect clarity what my relationship with my family had become. I slowly stood, feeling surprisingly calm, despite the emotional storm raging inside me. With measured movements, I retrieved my briefcase from beside my chair and placed it on the table. Do you know how much I've given this family over the past 10 years? I asked quietly. My father waved dismissively. Whatever it is, that's what family does. We support each other. Your mother and I supported you your entire childhood. Without a word, I unlatched the briefcase and removed a thick manila folder, placing it on the table, between dinner plates. The folder contained printed bank statements, copies of checks, receipts, and a detailed spreadsheet tracking every dollar I'd provided over the past decade. $312,000, I stated flatly. That's how much I've given this family in the last 10 years. The room went completely silent. Even Jason, normally quick with a comeback, seemed stunned by the specific figure. This breaks down to $145,000 to Dad for business expenses and medical bills, $50,000 to Mom for her car and various expenses, and $117,000 to Jason for education, vehicles, rent, and miscellaneous support. I began methodically reviewing the major expenses, pointing to documentation for each. Dad's back surgery, $28,000. Mom's new car, $32,000. Home renovation after the storm, $45,000. Jason's student loan payoff, $38,000. Business cash injection, $50,000. My father's face had drained of color. My mother's tears now seemed genuine rather than tactical. Jason stared at his plate, unable to meet my eyes. That engagement ring you're so proud of, Megan? $12,000 that Jason borrowed from me for investment purposes. And that dream house in Laurelhurst? I co-signed the business loan that's providing the down payment, putting my own credit at risk. Megan turned to Jason, confusion and anger battling on her face. You told me your business was doing well enough to afford the ring. You said the down payment was from your savings. My mother found her voice first. Why would you keep track of everything like this? Family doesn't keep score, Emmanuel. This is cold. Cold? I repeated. Is it cold to want recognition for a decade of sacrifice? Is it cold to expect basic gratitude instead of being called selfish? Selfish. My father attempted to regain control of the situation. Now wait, just a minute. If our positions were reversed, I would have done the same for you. That's what fathers do. Would you? I challenged. Would you have given over $300,000 with no expectation of repayment? Would you have delayed your own life goals to support mine? Because that's what I've done. I pulled out emails showing a job opportunity I'd declined 3 years earlier. A position in Singapore that would have advanced my career significantly, but would have made it impossible to provide regular financial support to my family. I turned this down because Mom called the same week saying you were behind on mortgage payments again. $60,000 more per year, international experience, stock options, all declined so I could stay close to help all of you. My revelation was met with stunned silence, the implications slowly sinking in. I've delayed buying a home, minimized my retirement savings, and haven't taken a real vacation in years because every extra dollar went to solving someone else's financial crisis. Jason finally spoke, his voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. But you make so much money. You can afford to help us. My salary isn't your safety net, I replied evenly. My success doesn't obligate me to finance everyone else's choices. I closed the folder and returned it to my briefcase, my decision crystallizing with each passing second. I've been your bank, not your son. That ends tonight. My father's shock was turning to panic as he realized the implications. Now hold on, Emmanuel. We can discuss this reasonably. No need for dramatic gestures. This isn't a negotiation, I stated firmly. I'm informing you that the financial support ends immediately. The credit card I gave you for emergencies will be canceled tomorrow. The monthly transfers to each of you will stop. The co-signed loans are your responsibility now. My mother began sobbing in earnest. How can you do this to us? We're your family. Yes, you are. And I hope someday we can have a relationship that isn't centered around money. But until then, I need to establish some boundaries. I reached into my pocket and removed my key to their house, placing it on the table alongside the credit card authorized for family emergencies. I'll always be your son and Jason's brother. That hasn't changed. but I'm no longer your financial solution. With that, I picked up my briefcase, turned, and walked toward the door. Behind me, I could hear the chaos erupting. My mother's tears, my father's angry demands that I return, Jason's confused attempts to process what was happening. "Emmanuel, don't you dare walk out that door," my father shouted. "You can't just cut us off like this. What about Jason's house? What about the wedding?" I paused at the threshold, turning back one last time. "What about my life, Dad? When does that get to be a priority?" Without waiting for an answer, I walked out, closing the door firmly behind me. I drove directly to a hotel, not trusting myself to return to my apartment, where memories of family gatherings might weaken my resolve. Once alone in the anonymous room, the emotional dam finally broke. 10 years of suppressed feelings surged through me: anger, grief, relief, guilt, all competing for dominance as I paced the confines of the hotel room. When I felt steady enough, I called Rebecca. "I did it," I told her, my voice still shaking. I showed them the documentation and told them I'm cutting off financial support. "I'm proud of you," she said. "That must have been incredibly difficult. How are you feeling?" Like I've both lost and found myself in the same moment. I admitted. Part of me feels terrible, like I've abandoned them. The other part feels like I can finally breathe. "Those feelings are normal," she assured me. "You're breaking a long-established pattern that never happens without discomfort." The first wave of reaction came within hours. My phone exploded with notifications, missed calls, voicemails, text messages, all demanding my attention, all employing different tactics to regain control. My father's messages veered between rage and grudging apology. "You embarrassed this family tonight. Call me immediately to discuss your behavior." Then later. Perhaps I was too harsh. "We should talk about reasonable expectations moving forward." And finally, "If this is how you want to play it, don't expect to be included in the will. Loyalty goes both ways." My mother took a different approach, focusing on health concerns and emotional manipulation. "Your father's blood pressure is through the roof because of this stress. If anything happens to him, I hope you can live with yourself. I haven't slept all night thinking about where we went wrong raising you to be so cold. Please call me sweetheart. I'm worried you're being influenced by people who don't understand family obligations." Jason's messages evolved from anger to calculated attempts at reconciliation. "Thanks for making my fiancé cry. Jerk. She thinks I lied to her about our finances. Look, I know things got heated, but you can't just cut us off with no warning. We have commitments based on your promises. Hey bro, can we grab lunch tomorrow? Just us. I think we can work this out. If Dad's not involved." By the third day, extended family members began calling. They'd clearly received a version of events that cast me as the villain, suddenly withholding support from a struggling family for no reason. After a week of constant harassment, I changed my phone number, sharing the new one only with Rebecca and a few close friends. I met with my financial advisor to protect my assets and revoke any remaining authorizations my family members might have to access my accounts. The most shocking discovery came when I returned to my apartment to find items moved and my personal files disturbed. The building's security footage confirmed my suspicion. My father had used his spare key to enter while I was at work. I immediately changed the locks and informed building management not to allow my family members access under any circumstances. 2 weeks after the confrontation, Jason's fiancée Megan reached out through my work email, the one address they still had access to. "I'm worried about Jason," she wrote. "He's not sleeping, and keeps talking about losing the house. I know you two had a falling out. But could we meet to discuss the loan situation? I'm sure this is all a misunderstanding. Her true concern became clear in the final paragraph. The mortgage company called about some paperwork issues with the down payment. Could you contact them directly to sort it out? It would mean so much to us. I replied briefly, explaining that I wouldn't be communicating about financial matters, and suggested they speak directly with the bank about their options. As I implemented complete financial separation, the real consequences began hitting my family. My father's construction business, which had relied on my regular infusions to cover cash flow issues, faced a legitimate crisis. Jason received notice from the mortgage company that his loan application was being reconsidered due to income verification problems. My parents, unable to maintain their lifestyle without my supplements, began falling behind on payments for their new furniture and my father's truck. Through a mutual friend, I heard about a family meeting held at my parents' house, where the full extent of their dependency was revealed. Jason admitted he couldn't afford the mortgage payments on the house he'd committed to buy. My father confessed the business was operating at a loss and had been for years, kept afloat only by my regular contributions. My mother discovered that the credit cards I had been paying the minimums on were now maxed out with no plan for repayment. Their desperate situation led to a coordinated attempt at reconciliation. I received a letter, clearly crafted by all three of them, designed to trigger maximum guilt. It referenced childhood memories, family traditions, and the uncertain future they now faced because of one misunderstanding at a heated dinner. My response was brief and businesslike. I'm open to rebuilding our relationship on healthier terms, but I will not resume financial support. I suggest consulting a financial advisor to create a sustainable budget based on your actual income. Their reaction was predictably angry, followed by a panicked realization that the situation was permanent. The fantasy that I would eventually relent and resume my role as family financier was finally confronted with reality. Bills continued arriving with no Emmanuel-shaped solution on the horizon. My father left a final voicemail on my work phone before I blocked that number too. You've made your point, son. We get it. Now let's talk about a reasonable support plan going forward. Family doesn't just abandon family. Even in his attempt at reconciliation, he couldn't conceive of a relationship that wasn't transactional. In his mind, I was still the solution to his problems, just temporarily withholding my assistance to make a point. He couldn't have been more wrong. This wasn't a negotiating tactic. It was a fundamental recalibration of our relationship. Painful, but necessary for everyone involved. 6 months passed before I had any significant contact with my family again. During that time, I accepted a promotion that required relocating to Seattle, giving me physical distance to match the emotional boundaries I'd established. I finally purchased my own waterfront condo, a property I'd had my eye on for years, but could never afford while supporting my family. My relationship with Rebecca strengthened through the transition. Her support never wavered, and she helped me recognize that establishing boundaries wasn't selfish, but necessary for my well-being. We began discussing engagement, planning a future that prioritized partnership over codependency. Weekly therapy sessions helped me process the complex emotions surrounding my family situation. The guilt didn't disappear overnight, but it gradually lost its stranglehold on my decision-making. I learned to distinguish between genuine responsibility and manufactured obligation, between helping and enabling. I established limited, structured contact with my family, agreeing to a monthly phone call with my mother only. These conversations were strained at first, revolving around thinly veiled references to financial struggles, but eventually evolved into more genuine exchanges as she adapted to the new reality. The final confrontation came unexpectedly when my father arrived unannounced at my workplace in Seattle. Security called up to confirm whether I would see him, and after a moment's hesitation, I agreed. He looked older than when I'd last seen him. The stress of financial reality etched more deeply in his face. "Jason's house is being foreclosed," he announced without preamble once we were seated in a conference room. "He needs $50,000 by the end of the month, or they'll lose everything." "I'm sorry to hear that," I replied calmly. "That must be difficult for him and Megan." My father stared at me, waiting for the offer of financial assistance that had always followed such announcements in the past. When none came, his expression hardened. "That's it? You're sorry? Your brother could be homeless? And you're just sorry? What options has he explored?" I asked. "Has he considered selling the house before foreclosure damages his credit? Has he looked into loan modifications? He can't afford to sell. The market's down, and they'll lose their deposit. Emmanuel, this is your brother we're talking about." "Yes, he is. And I care about him deeply. That's why I'm willing to help him create a financial plan instead of giving him money." My father's face reddened. "A plan? What good is a plan when they need cash now? This is exactly the selfish attitude that drove you away from your family." "Dad," I said quietly, "I didn't drive away from my family. I drove away from being used as an ATM. There's a difference. So that's it? 10 years of being there for you, raising you. And this is how you repay us? By watching your brother lose everything?" "Jason is losing his house because he committed to a mortgage he couldn't afford, not because I stopped subsidizing poor decisions. There's a difference between supporting family and enabling self-destruction." My father stood abruptly, knocking his chair backward. "I don't even recognize you anymore. The son I raised would never turn his back on family like this." "The son you raised is still here," I replied evenly. "He's just learned that true family support isn't always financial. Sometimes it's telling hard truths and allowing natural consequences." He turned to leave, but paused at the door. For the first time, I saw something beyond anger in his expression, a flicker of uncertainty, perhaps even reflection. "Your mother misses you," he said finally. "Whatever issues are between us, don't punish her." It was the closest thing to vulnerability I'd seen from him in years. "I'm not punishing anyone, Dad. I'm just no longer sacrificing my future to temporarily fix problems that will keep recurring without fundamental changes." He left without another word. But something had shifted in our dynamic. I was no longer the guilty son seeking approval, but an equal, speaking his truth, without apology. Over the following months, my family slowly adapted to their new reality. My father took on consulting work to increase his income, applying business skills he'd neglected while relying on my support. My mother reached out more regularly, our conversations gradually focusing on her life and interests rather than financial needs. Jason faced the consequences most directly, selling the house before foreclosure and moving into a modest apartment with Megan. He took a second job to stabilize their finances and, for the first time in his adult life, created a budget he actually followed. The wedding was postponed and significantly downsized, reflecting their actual resources rather than my imagined contribution. My own healing process involved joining a support group for people who had experienced financial exploitation by family members. Hearing others' stories helped me recognize that my situation, while painful, wasn't unique. Many adult children find themselves trapped in similar patterns, sacrificing their financial health on the altar of family obligation. I developed a healthier relationship with money, creating a charitable foundation that supported education for first-generation college students, helping others advance while maintaining clear boundaries. I learned to give from genuine choice, rather than guilt or obligation, finding joy in philanthropy that had been absent in forced family support. Perhaps the most difficult aspect of recovery was learning self-forgiveness for enabling the dysfunctional patterns for so long. I had been complicit in creating the dependency, responding to every crisis with open wallet rather than encouraging sustainable solutions. That recognition was painful, but necessary for growth. By Thanksgiving, I felt ready to attempt a carefully structured family gathering. I invited my parents, Jason and Megan, to my Seattle condo, establishing clear parameters in advance. The visit would be about rebuilding relationships, not discussing financial matters. To my surprise, they respected these boundaries. The conversation was sometimes awkward, but largely genuine. My father commented on the view from my condo without the passive-aggressive references to cost I'd expected. My mother brought photo albums rather than bills requiring attention. Jason talked about his new financial awareness with a maturity I hadn't seen before. I never really understood money until I had to manage without a safety net, he admitted during a moment alone. It's been hard, but I think I needed this wake-up call. Over the following year, cautious rebuilding continued. I established a relationship with my brother based on shared interests rather than financial dependency. Our conversations about sports and music rekindled a connection that money had previously distorted. My father's attitude evolved from resentment to grudging respect as I helped him restructure his business properly, offering expertise instead of cash. He implemented systems I'd suggested years earlier, finally seeing the value in my business acumen rather than just my wallet. You were right about the inventory management system, he conceded during a rare vulnerable moment. Would have saved me a fortune if I'd listened sooner. The most profound lesson from this experience wasn't about money at all, but about worth. For too long, I had measured my value to my family in dollars provided, equating love with financial support. Breaking that pattern forced everyone, myself included, to discover the true basis for our relationships. Setting boundaries ultimately helped everyone grow. My family developed financial self-sufficiency they never knew they could achieve. I reclaimed my life and future from the weight of endless obligation. And together, we began exploring what family might mean beyond transaction, something rooted in mutual respect rather than dependency. The path forward remains uncertain. Trust rebuilds slowly, and old patterns don't disappear overnight. But for the first time in a decade, I feel hopeful about our family's direction, not because I solved everyone's problems, but because I finally allowed them to solve their own. What about you? Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with loved ones? How did you balance compassion with self-protection? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more personal journeys of growth and healing. Sometimes the hardest choices lead to the healthiest outcomes, both for ourselves and those we truly care about. Thank you for listening. And remember, supporting others should never require sacrificing yourself.